Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And as always, I have a fabulous guest with me today, and she has a lot of information to share with us. Well, let's just get started. Her name is Tracy Slepcevic. She is a wife, mother, author, speaker, entrepreneur, integrative health coach, and the founder of Pure Health LLC, whose mission is to educate people on the incredible effects that nutrition and lifestyle choices have on their happiness and ability to lead the life they deserve. I'm kind of wondering right now when she ever sleeps. She is also an Air Force veteran, so I want to take a moment to say, Tracy, thank you for your service. And the best-selling author of, you're going to love this title, Warrior Mom, A Mother's Journey in Healing Her Son with Autism. She is educated in the field of complementary and alternative medicine and has dedicated over 14 years to researching various treatments and therapies for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. Over the years, she has worked with various doctors, scientists, advocates, and researchers, and has made it her mission to educate families on the importance of living a healthy lifestyle. The rate of autism continues to climb. Warrior Mom is all about addressing the underlying biological conditions that plague our children so they can live a healthier, more functional life. It is an alternative approach to healing and gives parents and listeners information on alternative treatments and therapies, including options for alternative medicine, nutrition, schooling, therapies, and more. Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for everything you do and have been doing.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, what a story you have. And first of all, I did want to say thank you again for your service. I really love our veterans. And just tell us how you got into the Air Force to begin with. I always find that fascinating. One of my guests actually told me that he wanted to do something that was exciting and fun. And I thought, oh, I didn't think that going and joining the military would be exciting and fun, but he made it sound like it really was.
Well, he must have had more fun than I did, but I initially did it to get out of Michigan and then I wanted to travel. But
Uh,
unfortunately, I didn't get to travel anywhere except to middle of nowhere, California. I did my 4 years and I was well educated in that time. I got my money for school and my benefits and all that
mhm.
stuff. So it definitely was worth the sacrifice.
Mhm. Well, I'm sorry you didn't get to travel the world, but at least you got to go somewhere.
Right?
And then tell us the story of becoming a warrior mom. Anything with the term warrior in it is near and dear to my heart. And I think that every woman is actually a warrior. And I think that every mom is like a superhero warrior because you have to be.
You do. And obviously, my journey began when my son was diagnosed with autism. And probably even before then, because I was battling through, doctors that were ignoring my questions and, a regional center that lost our paperwork and two preschools that are like, I'm sorry, your kid has autism or no, your kid has special needs. We can't care for him. So I had no answers and nobody was giving me answers. So I think that was the beginning of my journey. And that was a very difficult part of the journey. Once I did get those answers, I always say, God sends me angels at the most perfect time.
Mhm.
And a very dear friend of mine who was my naturopath at the time told me, Noah's going to be okay. I want you to go home and I want you to do your research because kids are making great strides with biomedical intervention. And at the time, I'm like, what's biomedical intervention? I had no idea. I had studied nutrition. I was in school for psychology as a psychology major, which I
Mhm.
quickly dropped out of psychology. I think I was getting my own psychology lesson.
Yeah, right. The
And
psychology of life, right?
yes, absolutely. So from there, I just sucked the tears back up into my eyes. I went home, started doing my research. This was beginning of 2009. And I- it was easy back then that you could Google healing autism. And unfortunately, due to censorship, you can't do that anymore. So it has made it more difficult for parents to
Wow.
do those searches. yeah.
Now, how old was Noah at the time? Because when all these people were telling you we can't take care of him, and he just good luck, God bless, and don't let the door hit you.
So when we finally figured it out, he was about 3.5. And that window of opportunity was starting to get smaller of,
Mm-hmm.
healing. So when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about like biomedical intervention, it's really addressing the underlying biological conditions associated with whatever is ailing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it was autism.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, we begin with the gut because there is a gut brain connection. And when you have issues in the gut, it definitely makes you brain foggy. It inhibits their ability to speak. So a lot of times with the proper, we call it like an anti-inflammatory diet approach, then kids really start to come to, not all
Mm-hmm.
children,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
a small selective few start to come to and regain their speech.
Wow.
So Noah just started when I implemented gluten-free, dairy-free, all this stuff, and removed refined carbs and sugars. Noah really started to spit out those words. He started to really come to a lot more social interaction, eye contact, and then we did so much more. I mean, he needed supplementation
Mm-hmm.
because he was on antibiotics for so long because he was an ear infection baby. And so that created a lot of yeast in the gut. So we
Mm-hmm.
needed to really do a total gut cleanse because he had leaky gut.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I just started watching him come alive. And
Mm-hmm.
so we implemented the diet, we implemented supplementation, we started doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And the combination of all these was really showing a lot of improvements for Noah.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very blessed that we were one of the few that he was able to regain his speech
Mm-hmm.
and really come to. So when I talk about healing, my son, I don't say that I changed or I cured him in any way. He still has autism.
Mm-hmm.
He is high functioning. He can take care of himself. He can
Mm-hmm.
drive a car. He can drive to his appointments. He can work. He can do whatever. So the whole point is to get these kids to a functioning state.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one thing is through nutrition, is to
Mm-hmm.
really just eat real food. And back then when I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah, we don't eat gluten, dairy, soy, or refined carbs and sugars, and people are like, well, what do you eat? And I'm like, real food.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely a huge change for me because I was
Mm-hmm.
going through this whole process with Noah. And I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you, I had my own underlying conditions, and Noah and I, with a lot of the genetic part of it in regards to having like MTHFR, mitochondrial disease, all these
Mm-hmm.
things, we share the same genes for sure. But then you
Mm-hmm.
have the environmental component. You can have a genetic predisposition for something, but you're going to have those environmental triggers, the
Mm-hmm.
toxins, the
Mm-hmm.
toxic soup that we live in. I mean, I can give you the number of things.
Yeah,
But
it's very scary when I hear how many. I've had people on the show before, and it was as soon as the interview was over, it's like, okay, what can I get rid of in my house?
right. No, I hear you. So I tell parents, I wrote my book not just as a guidebook. I gave it a little bit of my story because
Mm-hmm.
through my story there were a lot of trials and tribulations. My
Mm-hmm.
husband fights against big insurance, and at that
Mm-hmm.
time big insurance decided to fight back, and my husband wound up on the front page of the LA Times in a smear campaign. So we lost our home. We lost, I mean, our business. I mean, he was knocking doors doing consulting jobs, and I was
Oh,
selling everything that I possibly could to pay for Noah's treatments. I was bartering for treatments. I did marketing for the hyperbaric place, but I wanted to give parents hope that it's not really about, having an abundance of money to be able to pay for things. You can do
mhm,
something so simple as to feed your kid real food. And if you tell me that you can't, then that's just an excuse, and I'm not the right coach for you.
mhm,
But these kids, so first of all, I say you need three things to be successful as a warrior parent. And I don't, I wrote my journey as a warrior mom, but I don't disregard those warrior dads because they're definitely out there.
mhm,
And but you need three things. One,
mhm,
you need to have faith. You need to have faith that you're on the perfect path and that God will provide, and
mhm,
it'll all work out.
mhm,
And second, you need to trust the process, because we're all on this journey, and our journey
mhm,
sometimes leads us to something so amazing as, like, I found my purpose and
mhm,
my son gave me purpose in life.
mhm,
And then really set a clear intention, because
mhm,
once you set a clear intention to do something or to accomplish something,
mhm,
and you, like, people couldn't tell me, no one could tell me that my son was going to live a disabled life, and he
mhm,
was going to need care for the rest of his life. That didn't work
mhm,
for me. What worked for me was that, my son was going to live a fully functioning life, and I wasn't going to step in anything until he did.
mhm,
So, but I set a clear intention that was what I was going to do, and I did it.
mhm,
So those
mhm,
are really, that's like the recipe of success.
mhm,
And regardless of wherever that journey leads you,
mhm,
let's say JB Hanley, for instance. Him and his wife started Generation Rescue back in the day. They did the diet, they did everything, and unfortunately their son wasn't able to regain speech.
mhm,
And for the longest time, they didn't know what to do for him, because here they had this son that, they had, healed his gut. That's great.
mhm,
And he wasn't in pain anymore, but he was unable to communicate. So
mhm,
then spellers comes along, spelling to communicate, in this remarkable therapy that these individuals are able to do, so they can communicate and
mhm,
eventually communicate on devices. But
mhm,
and they're brilliant. So
mhm,
as we in the past wrote them off
mhm,
as, mentally disabled,
mhm,
uh, that's not true. They're just trapped in a body, and they're non-speaking. It's not that they're nonverbal, which means that they can't, verbally, so there's just the connection. The connection isn't going from their brain to their mouth as to where they can speak
mhm,
it. But, so every journey looks different. But then
mhm,
JB Hanley wrote a book with his son. And how amazing is that?
mhm,
That their journey just looked a lot different than mine.
mhm,
But if you just trust that God's got it, all lined up in its own perfect order, in which
mhm,
I don't believe God makes mistakes. So
mhm,
I don't believe people are punished, all those things. And you just have to look at these amazing individuals, because they have their own uh, uniqueness and special skills and talents, and they're all so different.
mhm.
But if you can just appreciate those things,
Mhm.
then it just makes the whole journey a whole lot easier.
And their own little gifts that they give to the world. So
Absolutely.
there's a few things I wanted to just touch on because, well, first of all, I love the fact that going through that awful experience with, your husband on the front page of what was it, the LA Times, and, being trashed and all this stuff, and you figured out a way to be able to financially bring your family through this. And as I had said to you before we started recording, all the veterans, I think that this is the veteran mentality, that they see a problem and it's like, okay, I got this. I'm going to figure it out no matter what. And that to me is the warrior spirit, as well as well, goes along with being in the military, I suppose. But the other thing is, when you talk about the gut, it seems like everything is related to the gut and gut health. And that really hasn't been in the forefront until recently, or the past several years. But gut health and the importance of that. And with the amount of education that you have, in the alternative healing and alternative caregiving, when did you start learning about nutrition and gut health? Because that was you were fairly young when you started doing that. It was before you had Noah, right?
So yeah, I started with the nutrition side of things when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And I had Noah a month before I turned 30.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two different things. You have, sure, you have nutrition and you learn what's healthy, what's good
Mm-hmm.
for you, what's good for your body. But I didn't know what gluten was. I could say I've been gluten-free since before gluten-free was cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to learn what's gluten, what's casein, all these things, and why would we eliminate these things from our diet. So,
Mm-hmm.
and to learn that they were inflammatory. But really, biomedical intervention, I mean, overnight when Noah was diagnosed, I just became an absolute nerd because I had a very short window and a short time to get a
Mm-hmm.
PhD in how to heal my kid.
Mm-hmm.
So that was as soon as Noah was diagnosed, and my naturopath was like, hey, Noah's going to be okay. I need you to go home and do your research. I researched everything. And I grew up that if it came in a package, a can, or a box, we probably ate it. So
Yep.
I wasn't raised to eat whole, healthy, organic, whatever. My husband, yes, because his family were farmers from Serbia. And so his mom, still to this day, her whole garden is wherever something can be planted. She
Mm-hmm.
has like vegetables and fruits and everything like all over her garden. Um, we have a small like little garden, and it's very neglected.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say, that's it. To really have a nice garden, you need to tend to it almost
Yeah,
daily.
you do. Yeah.
You do. And as therapeutic as it is, I lack the time um to do so. And then usually by the end of the day, I'm just like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
it. But I do recommend to people to plant a garden, grow your own. It's the best way to guarantee your actual nutrition that
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get. So if you can pick it, pluck it, grow it, skin it, you can eat it, is what I always
Mm-hmm.
say.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to be skinning my own food. I can tell you
No.
that right now. I do have a garden, and this year I was a lot more meticulous than I usually am, because usually I just throw it in there and say, best to you. And of course, living in Colorado, it's really not the ideal place to garden. It's a
No.
short season. Our soil has a lot of clay in it. But I was pretty meticulous this year, and I ended up with three of the biggest pumpkins. They're like 50 pounds each. So I gave two away and kept one for myself. And now I have a freezer full of pumpkin puree that I haven't done anything with it yet. But I will tell you, it was a tremendous amount of work. That one pumpkin took me about 3 days to cook and then clean everything up. It was just crazy, but I got it done.
I hear you. I had two little pumpkins that came through.
Oh,
And
nice.
we put them out front for Halloween. No, it's going back to an old way of eating
Mm-hmm.
and nutrition and so on and so forth. And that's how you begin to heal the body. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we did for Noah, to really to really start off, because
Mhm.
that was the affordable route. That was, I mean, I could negotiate treatments and therapies all day long, and nobody could say no to me, because I was very passionate, and I was very clear as to what I was going to create. And I did that. So, and then, I decided to put it all after so many years of being a parent mentor for so many parents. They're like, you
Mhm.
should write a book. You should put it
Mhm.
all in a book, because
Mhm.
there wasn't a guidebook
Mhm.
for parents. So I wrote a little bit of my story. I wrote a little bit of a guidebook. What do you do if you
Mhm.
think your kid could have autism?
Mhm.
What are the signs and the symptoms? What services through the state are provided?
Mhm.
So all this information. And then there's the whole section on biomedical intervention, and
Mhm.
how do the protocol that they typically follow to
Mhm.
address, these underlying conditions associated with autism.
Mhm.
So I put it all into one book, and it was released in April, and
Uh-huh.
it's doing really
This
good. And now
past
my
year,
Audible just came out last week.
did you narrate it yourself?
I did.
I figured. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It was
congratulations on the book. I mean, it's quite an accomplishment, but I'm sure that you have a lot of your own personal story in the book, because that's what people really relate to. And that is what makes you truly an expert in your field. But did that make you feel a little bit vulnerable when you did that?
when I wrote my story, it brought up a lot of, old memories,
Mhm.
and a little bit of anger in the
Mhm.
process, because there were a lot of people that stood in my way. Um,
Mhm.
but I can remember, and I can look back, that no matter how angry people could make me. So I say
Mhm.
the hardest part of being an autism parent is people's ignorance. And that goes across the board.
Mhm.
It starts with the whispers and the people talking about, the weird kid at the playground, and you can
Oh.
hear them. Or when my kid's kicking and screaming in an airport, and everyone's like, oh, she should keep that kid at home. Um, and then there was a point where they created these little note cards that you can hand to people, and I'm like, I'm not going to hand somebody a note card to tell them or to justify why it is that my kid's acting the way he is. They don't deserve
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So they can either be compassionate or they cannot be compassionate.
Mhm.
But that was one of the hardest things, was dealing with ignorance with school teachers who were like, oh, well, I'm going to use his one-on-one aid, knowing that he elopes, like he was a little escape artist.
Right.
But I'm going to borrow his one-on-one aid to pass out papers. And, as I schooled her for that and said, you have volunteers for that. And she did it anyways, right in front of my eyes. And there goes the
Oh.
kid out of the classroom without her. Now, when he was in kindergarten and I had him in an after school program at the Y, which was also on school campus, they lost my child. So, oh yeah, and didn't call me, didn't tell me, didn't nothing. It was when I got there to pick up Noah, I'm like, so how did he do today? Well, he wasn't very good today. And she walks off. And then I go over to get Noah, and then one of the caregivers, he's watching Noah, and I'm like, well, what happened with Noah today? And he's like, oh my gosh, they didn't call you? I
Oh
said,
my
no.
God.
And he's like, we lost him. What do you mean you lost him? And he's like, we had every known adult looking for your son. We went to the playground, and he went to the park adjacent to the schoolyard, which was pretty, it was a really big field he had to cross and go over to the park where there was a street, there was a hillside, there he could have been kidnapped, he
Oh
could have
my
been
God.
over, so all these things. And then they finally found him playing with sticks on the hillside in the park. And I'm like, nobody thought it to call me. So we had therapy that day, and I took Noah to therapy. So we were in a little bit of a hurry. I had to get him and I had to go. And I get him to therapy. I check him into therapy. I sit down and I'm like, this huge ton of bricks just smacks me on the head. Like all these what ifs or could haves that,
Right.
yes. And I just started bawling.
Oh,
I remember this dad that was sitting across from me, and we're still friends to this day. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." I'm like, my kid could have been kidnapped. He could have died. He could have, all these things. And he's like, "Oh my gosh." So I went home, and luckily I had a wonderful boss at the time that I called her, and I'm like, I need to take a few days off to figure out what to do with my son. And she's like, "You're good, take whatever time you need." And so luckily my nephew moved in with us, and he's like, "I'll take care of Noah, and I'll just work part-time. And if you could just put a roof over my head." So he took care of him, and I went back to work. And eventually, when Noah was in first grade, first or second, I resigned.
mhm,
And then I just went home to be with Noah full time because I saw that he wasn't making friends at school.
mhm.
He was getting picked on, and there was a lot of issues with school, with the school itself. And so
Well,
I made
yeah,
sure that I
like
was,
losing your kid.
yeah. So I made sure that I was available to
Jeez.
be there for my child. And
So I just have got to ask, I cannot stop thinking about that incident. That's just awful. Was there any repercussions to the school? Did they apologize profusely? Did they just like, well,
no,
it is what it is?
no, didn't even say they were sorry.
Oh my God.
And the director lived right across the street from me. Yeah, it wasn't the school that lost him. It was the aftercare program, the Y
Yeah.
program,
Yeah.
that lost him. But yes, when his teacher lost him, and I was, by the grace of God, in the classroom, and followed Noah out and brought him back, she got schooled, and I took Noah home. And then I said, until my son is moved to a different classroom,
Mhm.
he will not be returning to school because he is not safe to return to school. So, and she definitely got schooled
Mhm.
by me in front of everybody. Um,
Wow. That's
so,
just incredible.
but it was like, he had great teachers. He had so teachers. Um, battling with the school and services and this and that. It's an ongoing thing for every parent of a
Mhm.
child with special needs, to protect them, to keep them safe, to make sure that they're learning and growing. And now with indoctrination and everything else, you can't even send your kid to school safely. It's like,
Mhm.
as Noah got older, I never even realized that, okay, I got a functioning kid. He's doing great. He can go from class to class. He doesn't need an aide. All is well. And, but they're indoctrinating him. He's watching CNN news in school. They're teaching him about crazy stuff that they shouldn't be learning in an English class.
Right.
So I'm grateful that he's out of school, but that damage is done.
Mhm.
And so trying to undo that is interesting in today's day and age. But he is doing very well. He's going to school for film. He's 18 years old. He drives wherever he needs to go. And I'm very proud of him. So then I was able
Mhm.
to take on something new, in which I decided to start up a conference. And,
Mhm.
you know, now I don't have time to breathe.
Well, you do have to make time for that.
I know,
As a former respiratory therapist, that's very important.
right?
Um, and I want to go back to when you were talking about the window, that you had just had this brief window. So was that because at that time, he was 3.5. So his brain, his mind would be a little bit more malleable, plastique, and more susceptible to be able to change rather than when he was a little bit older.
Yep. Their brains are like sponges until they're about 7, 8 years old.
Mhm.
So, it's much easier and there's a higher success rate for, them regaining speech, them, turning them around and getting them to a functioning state. If you do it within those years that they're
Mhm.
still growing and learning.
Mhm.
Um, so it's just a better, they always say the earlier, the better,
Mhm.
chance of recovery.
Mhm. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit more about your book, that you actually have you received a very high profile endorsement or testimonial or review, however you want to call it, which I thought needed to be shared. So if you want to say it, or if you want me to say it, you just let me know.
You can say it. Which one?
Oh, which one? Okay, well then this is the one
I
I
had
saw. So
several.
obviously you had several. Okay, this is the one that is at the very top of your website. That it is, quote, an inspiring testimony to the power of maternal love
RFK
by
Jr. Yeah.
RFK Jr. That was like, wow.
He was my easiest endorsement.
He
He's
was?
like, I'm like, will you endorse my book? Sure. Just contact my assistant. I'll send it to her. She sent me the endorsement. I put it on the book. He's like, he didn't bother even, he probably never even read the manuscript. He's such a busy guy, but I had
Right,
known him and, we're in that same circle.
right.
So, and he is a very kind man. He truly
He
is.
seems
So
like it. Yeah.
he is, and he means well. I know he's got lots of skeletons in his closet,
Don't
especially
we
running
all?
for president. But he really does care about the kids. He didn't want to step into this arena of being an
Mm-hmm.
anti-vaxxer or whatever they want to call
Mm-hmm.
us these days. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to protect the kids, and
Mm-hmm.
and he has the best scientists and researchers and attorneys like backing him up in children's health defense. So it was an absolute honor that he would endorse my book. But you know, I have so many wonderful endorsements. The fact that Dr. Andrew Wakefield wrote my foreword, he literally stopped in the middle of writing a manuscript for a movie. Um,
Wow.
and to do my forward for me. And then, Del Bigtree, Dr. Judy Mikovits, Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Jerry Cartsenal. I mean, I have the whole gamut. JB Hanley. I mean, all the who's in this medical freedom world. I spent a year just traveling around and getting endorsements.
Wow. Okay, so you
Yeah.
did that even before the book was published?
Before, yeah, yes, before my pub
Mm-hmm.
date. So they gave me a deadline that
Mm-hmm.
I need all your endorsements and everything and turned in by a certain date.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a window of time.
Mhm. Oh my goodness. Well, again, the warrior spirit and just I see this obstacle, I'm going to take care of it and I'm going to get these endorsements. So, congratulations on that. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you was I looked at your YouTube channel and there was one episode that just kind of the title just popped out and kind of hit me in the face in a good way. And it is Healing Autism, What They Don't Want You to Know. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Um, I'm trying to think of, is that my One American News?
I
Um, I
don't remember.
Because I have another one that's healing autism, and it talks about the story of the Sewell family who recovered their daughter, and then Jeff Sewell is a famous tenor singer, um, and so his daughter sings now. So that's a really beautiful, positive story.
Now,
Um,
how old was his daughter when the healing took place?
So it was, it's kind of around the same time frame is Noah. You know, she was severely autistic. You know, they started implementing, you know, the diet and other forms of treatment. And then she really started to come to. And, you know, now I think she's 19 and she's fully functioning. She's going to college and she sings beautifully. So if you go on my YouTube, you can see, I think I called it Healing Autism, but I talk a little bit about their journey. So I took a clip of their story and then them singing at the end, which is just
Oh my goodness.
so
What an
they're
amazing.
actually flying all the way out from London to be at my conference to sing for us.
Okay, so now tell us about this conference.
So I used to run conferences with my husband. We used to run disaster management conferences back in the day. And I really liked running conferences. A little stressful, but I liked it. And I always wanted to run an autism conference. Now, the #1 autism conference over the years has been Autism One, but unfortunately, the founder and her husband passed away, and then she had a stroke. So it's been, you know, it's been wearing on her. And you know, I approached her initially because I never wanted to take the space of Autism One. And I have so much respect for what she's accomplished. And I invited her to the conference and she's in full support. And so I decided to do the Autism Health Summit. And what I wanted people to see is I wanted them to hear the facts. I wanted them to hear the truth from the best truth tellers on the planet. And then I also wanted an opportunity for them to see the latest and greatest in science and research and therapy and all of it, as to where they can have everything at, you know, at their disposal, but not just for parents and caregivers but also for providers as well. So we're providing CME credits for providers. And so they can come, they can learn more about biomedical intervention and how to approach things from a biomedical standpoint versus traditional Western medicine. And so all of it, and the #1 thing is community. You know, parents mostly with children on the spectrum or with any type of special needs, they need community. They need to know that they're not alone, because I remember feeling very alone when my son was diagnosed. And regardless of what a wonderful family and how supportive they are, it just, I didn't know if anybody was ever going to understand me. And I didn't have that back then. Today, I can pick up the phone and I can call a number of women who are all autism moms, and I could talk to them, I could cry to them, and I can, you know, but it's over the years, I've been able to build these relationships, and it would be nice to just see other parents build those relationships as well, because they need them. They need to know that they're not alone on this journey. And, you know,
Well, your conference is providing that opportunity to
yeah,
be able to do that. And it doesn't matter, you know, I'm sure there's people coming from all over the United States and maybe even internationally that, you know, you develop these friendships and these connections. And now with, you know, the internet, you can always stay in touch.
right.
It's not quite the same as being in person, especially when it's something like that. And then I have another question, and, you know, it's a little bit of a controversial topic. Let's just put it to you that way. Do you think that maybe traditional Western medicine is coming along and seeing these possibilities, or do you think that they're a little bit dug into their own modalities, that it's difficult for them to change? That was a mouthful.
Right. So I'm going to say that medical doctors in general aren't taught functional medicine in school. They're taught chemistry and what to prescribe for what ails. So I don't hold them accountable to an extent. You know, you have some of the most brilliant doctors that are like in big pharma's pockets. And so to me, regardless, and then you have other doctors who are sacrificing their licenses to do what it was that they signed up to do, and that was to do no harm. So do I believe so what's going on in the medical community, especially in pediatric medicine, is insanity. It is the definition of insanity. And that any pediatrician can't see what's going on. So I can tell you that, they get kickbacks for a lot of things. So I know you said you wanted this on YouTube, so I'll leave that word out.
Okay.
So they get kickbacks,
Uh-huh.
just like oncologists get kickbacks as well for prescribing chemo. So pediatricians, if they follow that regular schedule, which is insane, then they get kickbacks at the end of the year. And it really depends on where their motivation is. And it is a cold world to think that somebody is going to sacrifice the life of a child, because it's obvious what's going on. I mean, autism is 1 in 36 currently, and that's 8-year-olds. That is only, so CDC only evaluates 8-year-olds. It's not a range from 2 to 17. So I don't believe it's accurate, and they don't count adults, so there's so many new adults that are being diagnosed. And so that's not part of the numbers. And experts are saying in the next decade, we're going to look at autism being 1 in 2 by 2030. Yeah. And so I don't ever want to see that happen, but look, everybody knows somebody with autism.
Right.
When you and I were children, autism was unheard of.
Right.
Our idea, especially like in the early 80s, of autism was Dustin Hoffman's character in The Rain Man. And you didn't see that everywhere. You didn't see it anywhere, actually. So it's definitely more prevalent today. It's increasing at alarming rates. And the main thing is to empower parents to do their research. Don't believe me. Don't believe what's in my book. Don't believe what's in all these amazing doctors' books that they're writing to, it's all backed up by science. So I tell parents or family members or individuals on the spectrum, show me the science where you're correct. And even RFK Jr., where he's been drugged through the mud. All he says is, show me the science and I will believe you. And nobody can do it. So people like to talk out of both ends, but they don't, when it comes to actually showing the proof, because in that, whatever parts of my book where I wrote about certain things, I had to back it up with science. Everything has to be backed up. It was backed up with studies. I read over 100 PubMed studies when writing my book, and there was a lot of research that went into it. And I know that all these new books that are coming out as well, that there was a lot of research, put into those as well. So it's really about a parent or an individual just doing, their due diligence. And don't believe me. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe any of us. You can call us crazy. You can call us, all kinds of stuff. But in the end, I did my research. I didn't settle for, your son is going to be disabled for the rest of his life, and he will probably need care for the rest of his life. Today he takes care of himself. He drives where he needs to go. He goes to his own doctor's appointments on his own. So there's no limitations on my child. But if it was up to Western medicine, he had a doom and gloom prognosis, that he was not going to ever function, and you can't reverse autism,
No. Oh.
and you can't do all these things. And I'm not saying I reversed his autism. He's
Mhm.
he still has those autistic traits, but he is fully functioning. He can speak.
Mhm.
He can do everything that a typical teenager can do. Now, I can't
Mhm.
fix the typical teenager stuff, but
Oh, well.
you just go with it.
Right, exactly. And happy that you are dealing with that.
Right.
Okay, so now Tracy, where can people find you? Where can they get your book? How can they learn more about your health coaching and that type of thing? And as far as the conference goes, because this is airing after the conference, how can they find out more about the conference? Are there going to be any links that you can provide so they can, maybe hear about what happened during the conference or for future conferences? So just kind of moving forward.
Yes, so for CMEs, doctors will be able to purchase the conference online afterwards, because there will be a recording,
Okay.
and they can get that online to receive that CME certificate.
Mhm.
So that'll still be available, and anybody can view it afterwards. It'll just be a matter of when it's uploaded.
Okay,
Um,
excellent. And then,
but
of
as
course,
for
your
my
website.
book, my
Uh-huh.
book can be wherever books are sold. You can buy my book online.
Mhm.
Some Barnes and Nobles, it's in their stores. My Audible is exclusive to Amazon.
Mhm.
So it is only on Amazon, and I know a lot of people like Audibles, so um, that's where you can find that. But literally any online platform, as in the paperback cover. If you want a
Mhm.
hardcover, you have to go through me.
Mhm.
Um, so at warriormom.org, you can order the book, and I will send you a signed copy of the hardcover book. And as for the conference, you can go to autismhealth.com, and you can sign up for the following year's conference. It'll be
Mhm.
done annually. I do write a little bit about the conference in my book as well.
Mhm.
And I I think I covered everything.
Okay, excellent. Well, Tracy, this has been amazing. I mean, what a story. And, Noah must be proud of you,
Yeah. He's, he's a teenager. He's like,
right?
Mom, even though I don't agree with everything that you agree with, this is the little liberal in him. Um, and he's like, but I know you love me, and I know that
Mhm.
everything that you do was to benefit me and my health. So
Mhm.
at
Mhm.
least I
Yeah,
got
even though everything else is wrong, right?
that.
That's really funny.
It's
Okay,
all
so
good.
Tracy, do you have just one last little pearl of wisdom that you'd like to leave the listeners with, just to think about going forward?
Yeah. So take it all in strides, because these amazing individuals were put into our lives for a reason. And if we just take a step back and we just think to ourselves, you know what because my son gave me purpose.
Mhm.
So what can this individual do to impact you, but what can you do to impact the community of individuals and kids with autism? And the main thing is to just love them.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. You take care.
You too. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. What a story, but what an incredibly positive message of hope and healing, that healing is always possible as long as you take the right steps. So remember, do your research, no matter what it is that you're going through. If it's a child with autism, please contact Tracy. She is obviously a wealth of information as well as wonderful support for you. And if you see somebody screaming and carrying on an airport, please don't judge, because you just don't know what somebody else is walking through. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.